Hello, I am Serranos. I watch far too much anime to not talk about it, so I decided to do an early review recommendation of all the shows I've watched this season, with everything I put above F tier at 3 episodes watched. For how I'm rating this, it comes down entirely to my enjoyment of the show, graded on a curve comparing any new show I watched to others I've seen previously. The scores, I'm using a 19-point scale from 1 to 10 with point fives in between them and 0 excluded. 10s I consider to be my all-time favorite shows. 8s are what I would call great and feel happy to recommend to almost anyone. 6 and 5 range will be pretty mixed opinions, and while I might not consider them usually worth the time to watch, I might end up recommending them for a specific niche. 4 and below will naturally have more negative feelings than positive, and I prefer to consume content I like, so very rarely do I finish a show I have a negative opinion of. I typically favor comedies and action-oriented shows. The quality of animation is also something I find to be quite important. I'll give almost anything a fair shot, most of the time. For a detailed look at my tastes, I have included my Annie list in the description. To start off, 3 shows I like that won't be on this list. Vinland Saga Season 2 and Bofuri Season 2. While I wouldn't say both these are just more the same, as Vinland 2 is a time skip, basically full reset from the first season, I would say both are of at least the same quality or better of their first season, and I'll continue watching them, but for my seasonal tier list, I'm only going to be including new shows. Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible was something I really love, but it has been delayed, and episodes 7 through 12 aren't going to be airing until the spring season. So while it won't be covered here, I do plan to include it in my tier list for next season. Additionally, before I proceed, I will be spoiling the first 3 episodes for any show I cover in this video. With that said, shows I did not watch 3 episodes of. Good production value, but not good enough for me to not be weirded out by the premise. All of the show's good parts were censored. They decided to show us a cat's balls instead. Everything is below average, including gravity. I'm not a furry. I'm not a furry. The lack of effort on display genuinely offended me. For as ordinary as it claims to be, I'd only say it qualifies as such if your barometer for quality is in another world with my smartphone. Award for the most grating character. Other people would say the manga deserves better. Honestly, I deserve better. And next, for D tier, we have 5 shows. And while I did expect Sugar Apple Fairy Tale of them to be bad, I was actually excited for Spy Classroom. And speaking of Sugar Apple Fairy Tale, the setting did intrigue me somewhat with the fairies and humans having a past conflict and the results of that afterwards, where the humans win, make them slaves. Cool stuff going on there, slavery bad. But the writing did not do it for me. The story deviates so little from what I expected that it never caught my attention. My biggest issue among those is how predictable Jonas's betrayal in episode 3 was. They gave so many signs to not trust him, but An didn't pick up on any of them, or really make any attempt to stop him from stealing her prized sugar statue when she really should have known better and had the chance to do so. It felt way too much like the writer had an event in mind and pushed forward at the detriment of character to make it happen. Okay, maybe that wasn't my biggest issue, because there's absolutely no way I could listen to Mithril's voice for an entire season. Reborn to Master the Blade. I didn't even expect this to be especially good, but it still disappoints me in not even delivering a mediocre experience. The art style really doesn't appeal to me, and I also felt the animation was pretty lacking. It had its moments in the first episode, but it fell off after that. There's quite a bit of clunky dialogue. I was most annoyed when it came to exposition during fights. It was not entertaining to hear Inglis read a whole paragraph explaining how she's using her main character mana to ignore her opponent's gimmick. It did get a smile out of me a few times, but it was never really that funny. Definitely not enough to cover for my complaints. And Rawl. Ugh. The villain of the first few episodes is just so blatantly evil, I couldn't take him seriously. As an ambassador, he murders a man because he wouldn't let Rawl have sex with his wife. This is moments after talking about how he's attracted to our main character, who is 12 at the time. The show notes many other background characters are also staring at her lustfully. But why did you put this in? If this is how they write the first antagonist, I can't be remotely excited about any others we'll see in the future. I'm just so lacking in positives to pull out of the show. Very disappointed. And next we have Spy Classroom, which is the most confusing show I watched this season. Start with the overarching plot of the first 3 episodes. We have our team of 1 mentor and 7 girls that were going to flunk out of their respective spy academies. He chose them to help him complete an impossible mission, which works fine as the plot, but the biggest problem is how they get there. After a short introduction, Lily and their teacher Klaus get the second half of the first episode to develop. In the second episode, we have a group of girls trying various attempts at defeating Klaus, and after many losses, he explains to the team that his previous spy team, which had the reputation as the best spy team. I'm not sure why a spy team has a reputation, but we're going to ignore that. He explains that his previous team died attempting the mission they will be going on, except for him as he was on a solo assignment from the group's leader. After this, he gives them a choice. Are they in or are they out? They all accept and talk about the power of friendship, how Klaus is going to teach them really good in the month they have before the mission. And then we skip to them going on the mission. What? We're skipping an entire episode worth of content, or more, just so we can get right to the mission setup. But I don't have any stakes at this point. I don't know what these characters are capable of, and I don't even remember their names. The writer just wanted to skip right to the good part, but forgot to give me a reason to be satisfied that they were able to overcome their adversity. The author did not have all of the elements for a complete story. I think it can get better from here, but these 3 episodes did not give a good leg to stand on. Ningen Fushin. It feels like this took twice as much time as it actually needed to tell its story. They show you each character's backstory so you get to see how they were betrayed previously, and then they continue to talk about how they have trust issues because of that event so much. Character designs are decent, and I actually think the backstories of the characters are fine, but the presentation just kills it. Pacing and writing issues combine to make a beautiful dirt pie. As it stands, I'm just really lacking anything to pull me in. It's possible it gets better, but I'm willing to let someone else find out. High Card. I was not a fan of this world. It had too much bog standard shonen bullshit that I've seen a million times. This is hampered further by my complete lack of interest in playing cards and related puns therein. I need to see more creativity. The animation quality is the only positive I really have for it. While it's not a bad one to have, the greater issue is that outside of trading blows, I really don't care for the power sets the gloves provide. Oh yeah, all of the cards transform into gloves. In the first episode, we have 4 different cards. First is a lucky card, which is seen giving the wearer the ability to have better luck at poker and slot machines, which means on a level it's manipulating reality to fit the wielder's desire. That also extends to them being immune to attacks if they so wish, as any aggression towards him failed miserably. Second card is Deadly Hands. If he touches it, the object is turned into marbles. Third card lets you regenerate like Wolverine or Deadpool. Fourth card gives you a revolver. Yeah, it's not that cool. So of those, I'd say the luck card would be interesting if its power level wasn't so nebulous, but even then, it still didn't get used to create an interesting scenario because the guy's a scaredy cat and gave up his card without a fight. What made me dislike the show was episode 3. We have 2 of our main characters in their fight against Rockin' Rock, where they're driving along the side of a river in town with their enemy on the hood of their vehicle. And instead of the driver telling the other guy to jump out of the car and plunging into the water so they could force their enemy to untransform, we get a short fight outside of the car between Rock Dude and our gun-wielding protagonist. And then Zombie Man proceeds to use the car to push him into the water. Such an odd series of events. Also, Leo is introduced in this episode, and he's awful. The most intolerable personality trait imaginable. Male tsundere. And moving on to C tier, we have 3 shows. Starting with Reincarnation of the Strongest Exorcist. I feel whelmed. Quite standard isekai elements here. After being reborn, OP protagonist is misidentified as weak. Needs conflict as a child, so he has an evil sibling who contains only negative traits. Then best said sibling earning the right to go to magic school. Well, he still heavily outclasses most others thanks to his old abilities. Outside of being able to revive himself after being killed, I don't think his powers are too insane to the point where he couldn't be challenged by anyone. So far, anyways. Most interesting aspect is the main plot centered on how he was killed in his previous life. And to avoid the same fate in this one, he decides to build someone else to take the position as the world's strongest hero, so he wouldn't be the one called upon to solve problems and discarded when he no longer furthers the interests of nobility. The action was more on the passable side, and the one real fight we get in episode 3, the spell effects aren't particularly cool, but more so I would be far more interested if it didn't have the generic anime art style. If more series were able to get away from this repetitive muck, I would be pleased greatly. I think it was alright. I wouldn't recommend it, but some people would be fine killing time with this, I think. And moving on to second in C tier, the Ice Guy and his cool female colleague. Absolute saccharine. Blushing Face perfectly encapsulates what this series is. I was able to enjoy it, but it's not really for me, and I don't think it's meant to be. While the art style doesn't appeal to me, I do praise the design of Fuyutsuki. The brown and blue contrast in her eyes really pop. The main issue for me is I don't really connect to the office worker setting or the characters themselves. As a show, it's more focused on the cute moments than comedic, specifically in so as how Himuro himself is cute, which doesn't draw me in as I'm not into men. Which probably does lead to many romances aimed at men having blank slate male leads, now that I think about it. But in the end, I don't really have anything anchoring me to the show as motivation to keep watching it. I was entertained enough for 3 episodes, but I don't think I'll get much more out of continuing to watch it. And for middest of the mid, we have Giant Beasts of Ours. It was somewhat disappointing. While the first episode intrigued me in the world, the second and third fell flat. For positives, I thought Meow was a pretty great character, and Kumi was cute too. But more than any other, I like the design of the bunny girl in the OP, even if she hasn't actually shown up yet. I thought the hovership designs were pretty cool too. I also liked that the background characters were expressive and well cared for, not just being another faceless CGI mob. My main issue, though, is with the combat. The fight scenes are really not interesting, and it's over very quickly. But even only 2 minutes long, there's still too much dead air in the middle of them. In the main 2 fights we get with Jiro and Kumi joined together against giant beasts, both end with just one superpowered spear strike to its weak point. And while the monster getting up for phase 2 might be an old trope, I really needed more going on here. Building off that, the overall direction was not super coherent. The pacing felt quite poor at times, with long stretches of not much going on. While it definitely has some merits, it falters too much to earn a recommendation for me. I'll be giving it another look at the end of the season, but I didn't like it enough to continue right now. And moving on up a bit, the C plus tier, we got 3 more shows. Starting off with The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten. We have 2 characters that like each other, who have pointed out they're basically a couple anyway, with Mahiru coming from the apartment next door to cook and clean for Amane. Not to mention all the other times they hang out unrelated to the practical reasons for her coming over. They will still say they're not together. They'll probably keep denying that they're more than just friends until the second kid is on the way. It is still pretty cute, but to really like the show, I think you'd have to find that aspect of their relationship charming. I don't really see any interesting developments between the 2 characters this season, and I'm not intrigued by either of them individually. It's listed as a rom-com, but I don't find it funny enough to say it's a strong aspect of the show. I'd say it's passable, but there are too many good anime that come out every season, so I don't foresee myself coming back to this. Kind of the Great Snow Sea is visually striking. The perspective from the canopy of ice is truly beautiful. Polygon Pictures has been producing fully computer-generated anime since 2014, starting with Knights of Sidonia. And I've been slowly warming up to them. Their character work is better than it used to be, but still has room for improvement. Their environments, however, have been improving continuously, which is absolutely on display here. The world of the Snow Sea is a post-apocalyptic wasteland assumed to be Earth, based on the artifacts Kaina's elders have from before the end time. They are now entering a double jeopardy end of the world scenario, for the trees that provide life for the people in the canopy and on the surface are dying. To solve this issue, Ririha is searching for a man dubbed the Sage. To find him, she travels to the canopy and finds Kaina instead, where she learns that the situation up there is even more dire than on the surface, with Kaina's village being the last one of its kind left. One of the slower shows this season. While its setting is very cool, it seems to be rather standard fare story-wise. Boy meets girl, and they venture together to somehow save the world. I'll try to keep up with it, but I wouldn't give it a strong recommendation. And topping off C+, we have Farming Life in Another World. Super simple slice of life. Definitely the most laid back show this season, completely without drama or tension. It's not a show aimed at everyone, but it definitely hits the cozy zone for me, just being a good, relaxing watch after a stressful day at work. While escapism is something entertainment as a whole generally looks to achieve, Farming Life leans very heavily towards being the Animal Crossing of anime, except with way more animals. It achieves a good medium in how fast this farm progresses, continually expanding the fields, constructing new buildings and amenities in each episode. But his personal progression, on the other hand, that goes from 0 to 60 faster than a Tesla. He proposes to the vampire girl the same day they meet each other. What a Chad. Climbing on up to the next tier here, we got 3 more shows, starting off in B tier with Saving 80,000 Gold in Another World for My Retirement. This is certainly one of the isekai of all time, with our character skill being teleporting between a fantasy world and our own. Kind of an anti-isekai now that I think about it. The comedy clicked with me. Seeing Mitsuha learn about this new world and devising schemes to further her goals in it was pretty enjoyable. Her interactions manipulating people on both worlds is pretty good. But I do have to knock at some, as the fantasy world itself isn't interesting, with nothing unique about it having been presented so far. The most engaging part of the show are the flashbacks we get to conversations she held with her brother. Their inclusion does a good job to illustrate the close relationship they had with each other, as well as how their opinions sometimes differ. The biggest one being her brother's opposition to killing someone, while Mitsuha is willing to give a lead talk on what the nap is really about. It's a moderately enjoyable isekai, but if you're tired of the genre, don't worry about skipping it. Revenger is almost as edgy as the title would imply. It's got ninja running, lots of blood, and some brutal kills. Although it does unfortunately hold back some. I would say more so than the action though, the beautiful town set in Tokugawa era Japan has such life given into it by the artist. I never expected to see such nice detail in all the little places. The group our main character finds himself in is nicely varied, all having substantive differences in their weaponry and combat style. Usui is probably my favorite of the bunch, using some magic paper to suffocate people combined with a magnificent tattoo on his back is something I haven't seen before. Usui's connection to the bastardized version of Christianity is a very cool plot that I want to see unfold. This show really has a lot more going for it than I expected going in. Definitely a welcome surprise this season. Mo Ippon. Nice little slice of life, cute girls doing cute things show. This time with violence. Michi is a great leading character with such high energy that she carries around everywhere she goes, elevating all the other characters along the way. Even in just a few episodes together, it really feels like they're coming together as teammates. We get to see them practicing in the dojo, having silly arguments about definition of words, and just hanging out enjoying food together. There's so many little pieces that go into each character. A short plot for Sine is getting approval from her parents to continue doing judo into high school. While she's nervous about asking her mother that just wants her to focus on grades, her father overhears the conversation and has no issue approving it, simply wanting her to do what will make her happy. I really love how it takes these small conflicts for our characters and treats them seriously, because even if they're inconsequential, they can feel like genuine challenges for high schoolers. Such a nice and charming show. With that capping off B tier, getting into B+, I still have 8 more shows that I've really enjoyed so far. This season's quantity of good content is extremely impressive for a winter season. And without further expounding, The Fire Hunter has a beautiful, deadly world presented in an art style that's practically extinct. Fittingly so, humanity of this world is cursed and can no longer be near flames without instantaneously combusting, driving them to the brink of extinction as well. The primary power source of this world is provided by the eponymous Fire Hunters, that hunt fiends whose blood can be used as energy to power great machines as gas, oil, or coal would have previously. Probably my favorite part of the art design is in the monsters. The flowing fur and aberrant bodies perfectly conveys their presence in this world as a vicious, unpredictable entity. The greater plot at play here also has me significantly intrigued. Presented to our second protagonist, Koshi, he's tasked by a rich friend of his late father with figuring out how to control Skyfire, which is harvested from the much more dangerous flying variants of the grounded beast we have seen so far, and using the stronger fuel source to advance both machine technology and weaponry. The series is slowly paced at this point, and it might be best left to watch when it's completed, but it's definitely tickling my brain and left me wanting more. Following a somewhat bleak series, we have the ever-positive Buddy Daddies. Miri is the cutest creature present in this season. I initially assumed this would be much like Spy Family, but other than the loose feel you get from the character designs, I didn't feel they had that much in common. Action scenes in the first two episodes stand out in a bad way. They seriously lack a grounding in reality. I know. This is anime, but you can't expect me to take guns seriously in this world when bullets are stopped by a server's tray. And you have half a dozen men fail at landing a single shot on a stationary target after 20 plus seconds of continuous gunfire. I'm not even going to count leaving cover when you have a tactical advantage in placing yourself in aforementioned situation. Where it really clicked for me, though, is in episode 3 when we get away from the action and instead focus on our two protagonists individually coming to accept responsibility for taking care of Miri. I particularly liked Ray's side of it. We get a flashback to his childhood, how he was dehumanized by his father, purely raising him as a tool for killing, and refusing him any emotional connection. This concludes with Ray facing the decision of letting police take Miri, allowing him to wash his hands of her and returning to status quo, or committing to taking care of her and providing the family he never had. If this show had better action, it would be one of my favorites of this season. Even without that, I still think it's quite good. Handyman Saito in Another World. Great tabletop inspired isekai. Uses the setting of its world for jokes both fresh and classic, presented by super charming characters. While consistently focused on its comedy, it doesn't slouch at all in its animation on any aspect. Both daily life adventure and short action segments getting their due. It's been a high quality shorts compilation up to this point, but I am also quite hopeful for a linear story going forward, as at the end of episode 3, we see our main party and 5 other groups of side characters showing up to explore a brand new area that our party accidentally discovered in an old dungeon. As someone with a big affinity for pen and paper and also hates customers that don't understand what paying for expertise is, this is a great show. Capping off B plus tier, we got Endo and Kobayashi Live, the latest on tsundere villainous Liesel. It has a very long title and a fresh new spin on the villainous genre. Instead of just being isekai'd into a game, we have our characters playing the game itself, with the twist being that they can talk directly to the main romance target of the game, and they have to influence him to change the course of the story and save Kobayashi's favorite character, Liesel. The relationship between our two main couples, both in-game and out, is my favorite part of the show. Siegwald and Lieselot's parts are filled with cute and funny moments, mainly centered on Liesitan's behavior being exposed by her real-life characters, and Siegwald finding it adorable how far she'd go to avoid directly being friendly to Fine-chan. And as much as I enjoy the comedy, I particularly love Endo and Kobayashi's grounded emotional moments. Seeing Endo's past as a baseball prodigy being ended by an injury and Kobayashi giving him something new to live for resonates very well with me. I liked All Rats Lead to Doom quite a bit, but I think Endo and Kobayashi Live will be supplanting it as my favorite villainous show. Now we get into the top of my top shows and the full list revealed. While I don't have anything occupying the top slot in my tier, I do typically leave it unoccupied this early in the season since it's quite rare I consider a show to be one of the best I've seen after only a handful of episodes. Nonetheless, to commence with the reviews, Campfire Cooking in Another World with My Absurd Skill is a really great slice of life adventure. I initially didn't think much of the show before the season, just looking like another generic isekai from the promotional images, but then I realized it was being created by MAPPA, and they completely blew away my wholly incorrect first impression. First thing to catch me totally off guard is the protagonist, Tsuyoshi. Being a middle-aged office worker, he is incredibly intelligent and perceptive for a main character. In the first episode, he takes note that the king seems to be quite fat and wealthy while talking about how his kingdom is troubled by the Demon King, who occasionally invades them. Tsuyoshi, not wasting any time getting the hell out of there, buys a seat on a wagon heading out of town, in which he talks to a merchant who explains that the kingdom regularly goes to war with its neighbors, quickly supporting his suspicion that the king was using summoned heroes for less than noble reasons. Further cementing his desire to get away from the kingdom's influence as fast as possible, the Inter-Kingdom stagecoaches were suspended, leading him to hire a party of adventurers to accompany his journey on foot. To which I should bring up my favorite part of the show. The art direction is elite. This is a classic fantasy style. The backgrounds are great, the character design is oh so impressive. You can immediately tell who and what someone is just by looking at them. And, of course, not to be forgotten, anime food, which still manages to impress me after all these years. This is just the tip of the steak for this show, and I'm eagerly waiting for more. Tomo-chan as a Girl is a wonderful rom-com which takes place between a tomboy and a jock who is scared of how their relationship will change from being best friends to becoming something more. The characters are really what make the show. Jokes are consistently great, and I can't tell them better than just watching it, but I can say I never found myself being annoyed that a certain character is on screen or a gimmick that got repetitive. They all gelled together super well, which is enhanced by some great voice acting. It's a fairly uncomplicated show. If you like rom-coms, I'd be surprised if you don't end up loving it. And if you don't, one episode should be enough to decide on whether or not you ever will. In addition, you can rest easy about this being a never-ending will they, won't they rom-com. Even if they don't adapt all in one season, I can't imagine it being longer than two, and we will get a conclusion. It is a thoroughly charming and funny show. Magical Revolution of the Reincarnated Princess and the Genius Young Lady wins the award for longest title of the season by 2 letters. But that would be the least exceptional aspect of the show. It has top-notch writing accompanied by very lively animation. Episode 1, it did a great job setting up Crown Prince Algard's disposition and giving cause for why he would make such a rash decision of breaking off his engagement with Lady Ophelia, which ends up being the inciting incident for our story, bringing our 2 main heroines together. Not entirely by choice, as Anisfia kidnapped her, but to be fair, it was the best option at the time. Second episode gives a lot of time with Euphelia's father, Prime Minister, and the King, where he learns that both of his children have failed him miserably. But befitting his station, the Prime Minister is more measured, only reacting openly to Honest asking for his daughter's hand. And in the end, he ends up convincing the King into allowing Honest to have Euphelia as an assistant, since he is quite interested in them working together, progressing magicology to bring benefits to the nation at large. On another level, he accepts the idea of Honest eventually taking Euphelia as her wife and ascending to the throne in lieu of Algard, because fuck that little runt who'd disgrace his daughter like that. Revenge is a dish best served with Yuri. And to send us off, Trigun Stampede. I am a sucker for good animation, and this has been an absolute treat. So much so that calling this good animation is actually a massive understatement. I'd go as far to say this is one of the prettiest anime I've ever seen. The quality of Studio Orange's 3D work is unmatched. They leave me more impressed with every show they produce. It is still a TV production, so not everything's perfect. Episode 2 is weak in some spots compared to the first and third episodes, but I'd say the highs easily cover the just okay sequences thus far. Outside of the animation aspect, I find the music to be superb across the board. I'm also a big fan of the characters. All the charm on display with all the little details in their facial expressions and movement is something that Studio Orange has done very consistently. I did have moral criticisms for Vash's commitment to pacifism, but seeing him be quite willing to break that when it comes to his brother gives me confidence that he'll kill somebody if he really has to. Trigun Stampede was my favorite new show this season. I'd recommend it to anyone. This season really exceeded my expectations overall. I'm consistently impressed about how many good anime are being released every season. I can't think of a better time to be a fan. To close, I have to say thanks for watching this, and feel free to leave any feedback about the video or shows that I covered in the comments.